Dearly beloved, friends of Jesus, we gather together in the sight of God, filled with sorrow and grief. Our friend Jesus has suffered and he has died, and his earthly body has been laid to rest. This is a tender time. We have come to grieve and to comfort one another in our sorrow, and to draw on God's love and power. We have come to remember all that Jesus said to us and to take comfort in the shelter of the Almighty God. Let's pray together. Almighty and ever-loving God, thank you for this time we have together to gather and reflect on Jesus' life. You knew Jesus through and through. You loved him from the moment he was conceived. You were with him on the day of his birth and on the day of his death. You gave him a good life, a wonderful family. He loved them deeply, and they loved him deeply in return. You walked with him in good times and hard times. You were with him even on this dark Friday. Be with us today in our tears, in our aching hearts, in the smiles that memories bring as we grieve and remember Jesus. Be with us now. Amen.
My name is Jacob, and I will be reading the life story of Jesus. Jesus was born to Mary and Joseph of Nazareth while they were sojourning in Bethlehem during Herod's great taxation. His parents lived in Egypt for a number of years. When he was a small boy, moving the family back to Nazareth so Jesus could grow up among his extended family. A highlight of his childhood was a family trip to Jerusalem for Passover when he was around 12 years old. Jesus decided that he wasn't ready to go home, but he forgot to inform his parents, who only discovered he wasn't with the return caravan when they were many miles from the city. His parents never let him forget that. Maybe in response to that experience, he lived a very quiet life, never straying far from home until he was in his 30s. While Jesus was never married, he was very involved in the lives of his extended family, their children, and the family carpentry business. Jesus was a big support for his mother Mary in her grief after his father's passing. When Jesus was in his early 30s, a visit with his cousin John changed the course of his life forever. After this visit, he left Nazareth to lead an unsettled life, never having a home of his own again. He became a big traveler, passing through Galilee and Judea, and even into Samaria and the land beyond the Jordan. His family hoped that he would get over his traveling bug and settle down to raise a family. But that was not to be. Jesus was a person with a special light, a light from God, like the prophets of old. He traveled because he had a message from God. He was a powerful speaker, enthralling the young and the old, the rich and the poor alike, with his insight and wisdom. He spoke to us of great compassion of God, and that we too should have love for one another. In the course of Jesus' travels, he came to have 12 special friends who he called the disciples, as well as numerous followers, male and female, who generously provided for his needs out of their own resources. Jesus had many interesting encounters with people. If you tried to write down everything he did, the world could not contain the stories. He could make friends with anyone, tax collectors, people possessed by demons, the educated, the rich, people who were blind or lame, lepers, Pharisees, Samaritans. Jesus was interested in everyone. He was the kindest man, the most loving man, a person who had special gifts given to him by God. Those of you who have seen the power of his miracles know what I am talking about. In the final years of his life, Jesus became famous, with thousands flocking to hear him speak. Some believed him to be the Messiah, the chosen one of Israel. While he was deeply loved, he also had some bitter enemies, people who were threatened by his sometimes biting honesty. He became so famous, he attracted the attention of religious and political leaders who plotted to kill him. One of his own disciples, who we will not name today, God have mercy on his soul, betrayed him. Jesus was arrested and tried before Pontius Pilate. Up to the end, there were some among us who hoped for a display of God's power, that Jesus would begin to speak and amaze all who heard him, as he amazed us all for so long. But he didn't open his mouth in those final days. Those who saw him in his final hours described someone who was resolute in his faith, still talking to God even as he was executed by crucifixion. As a common criminal, he died just outside the city of Jerusalem that he loved on the Friday before Passover. Left to grieve his passing are his mother Mary, his brother James, and various in-laws, his Aunt Mary, wife of Clopas, many cousins, nieces, and nephews, his 11 special followers, and innumerable friends. He was predeceased by his father Joseph and his cousin John the Baptizer. While Jesus had no children of his own, he never made much money or owned any property. He left a mark that will never be forgotten. He will be remembered forever in the hearts of those who love him.
Reading now from Isaiah 53, 1-9. Who has believed our message, and to whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed? He grew up before him like a tender shoot, and like a root out of dry ground. He had no beauty or majesty to attract us to him, nothing in his appearance that we should desire him. He was despised and rejected by mankind, a man of suffering and familiar with pain. Like one from whom people hide their faces, he was despised, and we held him in low esteem. Surely he took up our pain and bore our suffering, and yet we considered him punished by God, stricken by him, and afflicted. But he was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that brought us peace was on him, and by his wounds we are healed. We all, like sheep, have gone astray. Each of us has turned to our own way, and the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all. He was oppressed and afflicted, yet he did not open his mouth. He was led like a lamb to the slaughter, and as a sheep before its shearers is silent, so he did not open his mouth. By oppression and judgment he was taken away, yet who of his generation protested? For he was cut off from the land of the living. For the transgression of my people he was punished. He was assigned a grave with the wicked and with the rich in his death, though he had done no violence, nor was any deceit in his mouth.
I remember the first time I met Jesus. I had been lost for some years, possessed by demons, and not myself. I hardly recall that time at all, but the first clear memory I have is of a man holding my hand and calling my name. And I looked into his eyes and I felt such love and acceptance from him. He just radiated that type of love. After that, I followed Jesus along with a number of other women. He had started his tour of Israel then. We followed Jesus as our teacher from place to place. Jesus was someone who loved people. He loved to meet them. He loved to hear their stories, and he loved to help them in whatever way he could. And people flocked to see him. They couldn't get enough of him. Sometimes we would travel ahead to a place he was going and let people know he was on his way. Crowds of people would greet him as he came into town, along with all the sick, hobbling along or being carried. And Jesus would heal them and he would teach them. I remember once Jesus was out on a hillside teaching, and he told us how we were blessed of God as the poor, as those who mourn, as those who are hungry, as those who long for peace. His heart went out to the crowd, to us, and we knew he spoke with the authority of God. And when we were hungry, he would feel our hunger and he fed us, our spirits and our stomachs. He always anticipated our needs. And he showed us that God cared about everyone, not just the rich, not just the well-educated or the powerful, but everyone. We had traveled across the sea to the place of the Gadarenes. And there was a man there who was out of his mind. The kind of man you would walk a kilometer to avoid. He was naked and screaming, an obvious lunatic. Peter and the other men who were rowing changed direction when they saw him screaming on the shore. But Jesus told them, no, we would aim for him. We would land our boat right next to him. It was Jesus who eagerly got out of the boat, went to the man, and spoke to him. We stayed where we were. In a few minutes, Jesus had that man clothed and seated and listening in his right mind to everything Jesus had to say. Or another time, there was a woman who had been caught in adultery, and she was brought before Jesus by the authorities. She was a test case that he would say about this person who had obviously broken the law. I can still picture it. The woman in a heap on the ground, all the men, righteous and angry, standing with stones in their hands, ready to punish, waiting for Jesus to say the word. Jesus just crouched down beside the woman, and he stayed like that for a long time, just writing on the sand. And when he spoke, he said, "Let he who is without sin throw the first stone." And one by one, starting with the oldest, they dropped their rocks and turned away. And Jesus was left sitting on the ground with the woman. And I can still see her face as she looked up from the ground and saw that none of her accusers remained. She looked in Jesus' face, and I know what she saw there. He told her to go in peace and to sin no more. He taught us about the kingdom and how we are part of it, how we are part of the coming kingdom. Just a few weeks ago, Jesus was invited to the home of one of the Pharisees, and a woman came in. And people knew by the way she looked that this was an unfortunate woman, a woman who had known much grief in her life. She had taken all she owned and purchased an alabaster flask of perfume. She poured it on Jesus' feet and wiped them with her hair. I can still smell the fragrance that filled the whole house. Some protested, thinking that what a waste of money that was. But I still remember Jesus' words. He said that she had anointed him for his burial. At that time, we didn't know what he meant, but now I see that he knew this was coming. The whole time, we were heading to Jerusalem. He knew where it would end. I can't really find words today to say what Jesus meant to me. I have left everything to follow him. I believe he was the chosen one of God, and we followed him to the end. We saw the death that was laid on him by Pilate, a death that no one should have to endure, least of all a man as pure and guiltless as Jesus. It is a cruel world we live in. We are born into suffering, and Jesus himself tasted all of it. Now we too bear our suffering, our grief. I don't know how we will go on without him, and I would give anything to see him again. I would fall at his feet and tell him what he meant to me. But now that chance is gone, and it seems that the world has grown dark. What I will try to do now is put one foot in front of the other and go on. Remember what Jesus taught us. Remember how he walked and lived and talked. That is the way I want to live. God, give us the strength to not forget Jesus of Nazareth, and may the God of peace be with him.
I really didn't want to get up and do this tribute, but the other guys said I had to. And what they say is that usually with my big mouth I've got something to say about everything, but I really don't feel like it today. And if you don't get that, you'll probably understand that in a few minutes. I hate wearing these things, but then the doc says I gotta. We all got to know Jesus about the same time. It was about 3 years ago when he was just starting out. And what do you say about a stranger that tells you to leave your family and your home and your job and go with him? And what do you say about someone who asks you to do that and then you just do it? He was the kind of person you listen to. You listen to him from a deep place inside yourself. It was like he had the words of life, and you wanted to listen to him. But as my young buddy John says, it was like he was the word of life. And you just wanted to listen to him forever. So I remember the first day we met, my brother Andrew comes running up to me and said, "Hey, we found the Messiah." Well, anybody would have wanted to see that. I mean, we've been waiting for the Messiah for years and decades and centuries. So I went with him. And what does the first thing Jesus say to me? He says, "You are Simon, son of John, but I'm going to call you Peter, the rock." Kind of like that nickname. It's kind of stuck ever since. The boys picked it up pretty quick. So that's what they called me. And just a little while later, I'm out fishing with Andrew and the boys again. And Jesus says, "Hey guys, follow me. I'm going to make you fishers of men." We didn't really understand what he meant by that, but we just dropped what we were doing and we followed him to check things out. Some of the other guys, James and John, they did the same thing. There's something about Jesus that just kind of drew you in. And he had the power to back up what he said, too. The first time I take him home to my place in Capernaum, my mother-in-law is really, really sick. My wife is really worried about her mom. So we go to Jesus and say, "Hey, can you do something? Can you help us?" And he just takes her by the hand, rebukes the fever, and boom, she's up and well. And of course, she just, being mama, she just goes right into the kitchen. She whips up this big, awesome meal for us, and we had a great night there. And then all the neighbors and people from all over town start coming and banging on the door and wanting to see Jesus. And They brought the sick and the demonized, and Jesus heals all of them. It was amazing. And the weirdest thing happened. The next day we're looking for him to kind of debrief and talk about it, and he's off by himself praying somewhere. We look all over the place, can't find him. I guess maybe that's where he got his power. I don't know. So we tagged along a little more with him just to see what he would do next. We took a bit of a break from fishing, and we actually went around Galilee and listening to him, and he was preaching about the kingdom of God and healing people and casting out demons. It was a wild time. Well, we went back to work, and the next time I saw Jesus, he was borrowing my boat, as a temporary pulpit, because there's so many people on the beach, he couldn't make himself heard. So he sits in the boat off the shore, and he talks. We had been fishing all night, and we were absolutely toast. We were so tired, and I wasn't in the best of moods because we didn't catch a thing. So when he was done talking, he says, "Hey guys, go out into the deep water and throw your nets down for a catch." Now, I'm kind of embarrassed by my attitude, because I thought, this dude is a carpenter, and I am the fisherman, and we know the trade. So I had a bad attitude, but we just, kind of humored him anyway, and you'll never believe what happened. I still can't believe it. We did like he said. We let down our nets, and they were full. Wherever those fished last night, I don't know, but the nets were full. And we had to get James and John to get their boat to help us. And both boats almost sank. They're so full of fish. Oh man, that ever changed my attitude about Jesus. We dragged the boats up on shore, and I just fall at his feet and say, "Jesus, you gotta leave. I'm a sinful man. I don't deserve to be around you." Well, after that, he looks me right in the eye and says, "Don't be afraid, Pete. From now on, you're going to be catching men." I think this was God talking to me. It may sound crazy, but I know this was God talking to me. So we did it. The rest of the lads can back up my story. We took off that big catch of fish, set up our families really well, and we just kind of folded the family business and started following Jesus all around. We were all in. I could go on all day with my stories, and these guys could back me up. One time I actually walked on water like Jesus did. It didn't end so great, but I walked on water just like him. I just want you to know that was pretty cool. But we're always trying to figure out what he meant when he was teaching. And none of us had much formal schooling with books and stuff. But he was pretty patient most of the time. And he would explain it. We'd have to pull him aside saying, "What the dickens were you saying? What did you mean by that?" And generally he was pretty patient, and he'd go over it again. There was a power about Jesus that I'd never seen with anyone before. He spoke from that place of power, and he could do things by his very word, healing the sick and talking to demons, and they'd listen. And even out in the lake one time, even the storm, even the wind and the storm would settle down when he spoke. Now, this may sound unbelievable, but we saw it with our own eyes. He even talked to a dead guy and brought him back to life. I wish we could do that now. Anyway, that's the kind of man he was. But in spite of all this power, he was one of us. He was our friend. He cared for us, and he talked to us about our own stuff. He knew us through and through. When you live together and travel together for 3 years, you see the good, the bad, and the ugly. But there's no ugly side to him. No bad side either. He just plain loved us. And the other guys, well, they're pretty hard to get along with. Me, I'm not so bad, but he loved us the way we were. Well, we came to see that he wasn't just any ordinary guy, or even an ordinary prophet like in the scriptures. We came to see we actually believed he was the Messiah, the sent one from God, right? And on the last Sabbath, when we entered into Jerusalem, the whole city sang his praises, and we thought his time had come. We thought finally he's going to be in the right place where he belongs. We had the world by the tail. And those Romans, we thought, they're going to be out of here and things are going to be great. But things went sideways real quick. He just ticked off the wrong people. And that night he was arrested. I just still can't believe what happened. I tried to protect him. Okay, I know what you're thinking, but I tried to stick up for him. And I know I'm not great with a sword, but I still tried. I still tried. But I don't get it. I whacked this guy's ear off. I mean, my aim's not great, but I whack off his ear, and Jesus turns around me and saying, "What are you doing? Stop it." I said, "Lord, we've got your back. They're not going to do this to you." He said, "Stop. Pete, you're going to live by the sword. You're going to die by the sword." And then he heals the guy's ear. We just didn't know what to do. We all just scattered. We thought, what's going on? Jesus says, "I got to fulfill these prophecies." And they're going, What? I just didn't understand. Forgiving your enemies. I mean, sure, he talks about it. It's a nice idea, but not these guys, not these thugs. And if you saw what they did to him afterwards, how could anybody forgive that? And yet he does that as he's dying. He forgives them. It's just too much to understand. We live in the real world. I said I was going to die for him. I tried to have his back, but just like always, Jesus had a different way of doing things. He said, "I'm the way, the truth, and the life," but where's that life now? Well, there's so many things I wish I could have done differently. So many things. Like in that last supper we had together, our last meal, he tells us, "Okay, guys, I want you, this is my command, my big thing. I want you to love each other like I've loved you." And then he washes our feet. He washes our feet like a servant. I didn't want any part of that myself, and the other guys did, but I said, "No way, God, Jesus, you're not going to wash my feet." Then he says this thing, if I don't wash your feet, you can't have anything to do with me. And I said, "Okay, God, Jesus, give me the whole deal." No, feet's enough, Pete. Just relax. So this thing about loving each other, I kind of get that. But loving enemies, that's just too much. Too much for me. And then he says, "Greater love has no man than this, that he lays down his life for his friends." I was trying to lay down my life for him, but he didn't want that. And then he goes and dies. Was he trying to die for us? What's with that? Jesus, I'm sorry. I'm still that sinful man you met on the beach that day. We're all sinful men. We bailed on you. We left you. We deserted you when you needed us most. And when I went back to watch what was going on, there's 3 times. I know, just like you said. 3 times I said I didn't even know you. And then you look at me, and those eyes, I can't forget that. I can't get that image out of my head. You still love me. Jesus, I know I'm a big mouth. I know I shoot my mouth off too much, and I do stupid, impulsive things, but I did try to love you. And I know that's what you want us to do for everybody who's left. I don't know how anybody could say when people remember this day, how anyone could ever call it a good day. And I suppose the sun will come up tomorrow, I hope. But this is a really dark day. But friends, I know there's one thing that Jesus would want as we remember him. There's one thing. We should love each other and take care of each other even as we're grieving. And Mary, I know that John's going to look after you now. He's going to take you into his house and you'll be all right, and that's good. We know how hard it was for you to give up your boy to all this life that he led, but he loved us. He had that special calling. So I just ask for all of us as we go from here that we not just sort of go our own way, but that we look out for each other, that we love one another, just like Jesus loved us.
Our service for Jesus is coming to an end. Join me in a final prayer together. Let's stand. God, thank you for being with us in this wondering moment where we stand poised between life and death, filled to the brim with sorrow, filled with thoughts of what has been and what lies before us. Thank you for the gift of Jesus. Thank you for our friend Jesus, who was a gift to the world, a gift in each of our lives. Comfort us as we are shaken by the horror of these last hours. Be our friend in this time of sorrow and sustain us in the days to come. Now may God bless you and keep you. May the very face of God shine upon you and be gracious to you. May God's presence embrace you and give you eternal peace. Amen.